Tonight, the rise of reform. Nigel Farage pledges to come for Scotland after the party gains control of a string of councils in England and wins a Westminster by-election.
In Scotland, we've made great advances and the Conservative Party there has almost disappeared.
Also making the headlines, Scottish Government drops its plans to introduce a new law to tackle misogyny. Ahead of Sunday's Old Firm derby, both managers have their say on whether Rangers players should give a guard of honour.
Whatever the rivalry is, or whatever, it's a mark of respect.
I don't know why there's always a big clamour about a guard of honour. It's never happened, whether it's Celtic, whether it's Rangers.
My feet may wander.
We catch up with the only artist in the world to score a hit in the UK album charts every year since 1988. I'm John Mackay. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. Nigel Farage has said Scotland is next after his Reform Party made big gains across England, winning a Westminster by-election from Labour and hundreds of council seats from the Conservatives. The results put Reform on course to make an historic breakthrough in the Scottish Parliament elections next year. A warning, this report from our Westminster correspondent Paris Goutsianis contains flash photography.
Coming to an election near you, get ready for more scenes like this. That's Nigel Farage's message to Scottish voters after historic election victories across England. Reform beat Labour in the Runcorn and Helsby by-election by just 6 votes, the smallest ever by-election winning margin. But this was one of Labour's safest seats. Reform now believes it can win across the UK, and its leader is turning his attention to next year's Holyrood elections.
What's next is preparing for the Welsh and Scottish Parliament elections next year. In Scotland, we've made great advances and the Conservative Party there has almost disappeared. And one of the big messages tonight is the Conservative vote has been the wasted vote. In much of this country now, if you vote Conservative, you're likely to get Labour. We are now the real opposition to Labour.
The Tories lost hundreds of council seats to Reform and the regional mayor's race in Lincolnshire, once a Tory stronghold.
We always knew that this was going to be a challenging election. I'd been saying that right from the minute that I became leader of the party late last year. And we are renewing our party, we are rebuilding, but it's going to be a long journey.
Tough economic decisions, like taking help with energy bills from millions of pensioners, fueled voters' anger with Labour. But Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he'll double down on his agenda, not change course.
What I take out of this is, yes, I get it, we need to deliver that change even more quickly, and we need to go even further. I've been saying for some weeks we should turbocharge what we're doing. These results fortify that in me, if you like, and we will deliver that change that working people need.
Farage is now a real threat to the established political parties south of the border. And as a consequence of that, it indicates that the agenda that he peddles has got significant appeal to individuals, and that has got to be tackled. But the other thing that it highlights is the abject failure of the Labour government to deliver change for people in this country.
Labour was also squeezed by gains for the Greens and Liberal Democrats. Lib Dem leader Ed Davey says his party is the only one standing up to Nigel Farage and Donald Trump.
We want to take on reform. I think when people understand what they believe for the NHS, they want to privatise it, for the way they support people like Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, I think people will turn away. They don't represent British values.
With just over a year until Holyrood elections, it's this man who will be shaping the political debate across the UK even more.
So Paris, what's the fallout likely to be from these elections?
Well, John, here at Westminster, this will add to pressure on Sir Keir Starmer from within his own party over those unpopular economic decisions, particularly on the winter fuel payment. He's expected to try and refresh his government before the summer with a tough new immigration policy and a reshuffle of his cabinet. Kemi Badenoch's leadership was already facing questions, and those will only grow. In Scotland, it does now look like Reform will make that historic breakthrough. Polling shows that they could win around a dozen seats. That will come at the expense of Labour and the Tories, and it'll make an SNP victory all the more likely. But it'll make governing much harder for whoever wins, because it'll be so much harder to put together the votes to pass a budget. You know, voters are clearly angry with all the established parties. Nigel Farage's rise is a problem for all of them.
Paris at Westminster, thank you. The Scottish Government has dropped its plans to introduce a new law to tackle misogyny ahead of next year's Holyrood election. Ministers had promised a bill to improve protections for women and girls. However, they will now seek to amend existing legislation. Opposition parties have described the move as a shameful backward step. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie has more. So Ewan, why has the Scottish Government taken this decision?
Well, ministers say it comes down to a question of timing. They argue that this is a very complex area of policy and law, and it will take time to examine exactly how and when it should be applied. And that will involve looking at some of the issues coming from that Supreme Court ruling that a woman is defined by biological sex in the eyes of the law. And that, they say, cannot be done within this parliamentary session. Instead, what they will do is beef up the Hate Crime Act to offer more protection, but there are concerns that that won't go far enough, that it will be quite narrow and won't address issues such as street harassment, unlike the original proposals.
They were going to attack more behaviours, but specifically labelling those as misogynistic, which from a feminist perspective, from a perspective of trying to tackle violence against women, is really important. That symbolic impact of saying this is misogyny is really, really powerful.
And Ewan, what other reaction has there been?
Well, the Conservatives say this looks like a humiliating U-turn, another policy from the SNP to be ditched. Labour say it's a shameful, broken promise to women, yet another one when misogyny is on the rise. And the Lib Dems and Greens also say this is a wrong move. They're also all very critical of the government's dropping of a new law to ban conversion therapy. And women's groups say they feel let down and they're effectively back to where they were 5 years ago.
The reality is that women in Scotland continue to experience, and girls continue to experience horrendous misogyny on a daily basis. And the abandonment of this bill without any consultation with the sector that worked so hard to help develop it is really, really discouraging.
Well, John Swinney is due to set out his programme for government next Tuesday, where he'll announce his plans for the rest of this parliamentary session. Now, releasing this information on the Friday before in a written response to a question does suggest he's trying to clear the decks. Ministers want the focus next week to be on what the government will do, rather than what it's not going to do.
Ewan, thank you. NHS Lothian has apologised to staff working in maternity services after a review found there was a toxic workplace culture. A whistleblower report at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary previously detailed staff shortages and poor working relationships and said it had an impact on patient safety. An independent review has uncovered distrust between managers and frontline workers.
We've already been doing a lot of work over the last few months in addressing some of the priority issues around staffing levels and ensuring that we have effective and safe systems of work in place to ensure patient safety. And we're now focusing on culture and working with our teams to understand and what we can do more with them to develop the right sorts of workplace behaviours and approaches that will ensure they feel safe, supported and able to raise concerns if they do have them in a way that will be taken forward appropriately.
4 more people have been arrested in the Glasgow area in connection with ongoing gangland violence across the Central Belt. Police say this brings the total to 24 arrests. 2 men arrested last month in connection with willful fire-raising and breach of the peace incidents will appear at Glasgow Sheriff Court on Monday. Trans rights groups are protesting about guidance published by the Equality and Human Rights Commission over same-sex spaces. Hundreds stood outside the Commission's Glasgow headquarters after it advised places like hospitals, shops and restaurants had to provide single-sex spaces. The guidance came after the Supreme Court ruling last month that the legal definition of a woman refers to biological women.
EHRC's interim guidance goes a step further. It is completely unworkable. It goes against human rights. It's an attempt to police where trans people go, what spaces we can exist in.
It's an absolute joke. I work in women's homelessness services in Govan. I can say firsthand, women's services are on their knees right now. Austerity has completely crippled them. The idea that this guidance is meant to protect me, the people I work with, is a complete joke.
I deserve to be who I am, and the world needs to accept us for who we are.
Schools are seeing a rise in misogyny and abuse and are becoming a battleground of blame and violence, according to a teaching union. The NASUWT says that leading politicians should do more to help combat the rise of the far right, adding that they've seen an exponential rise in teacher abuse and are now spending more time combating sexist and racist views shared by pupils.
The two major behaviour surveys we've done in 2023 and then earlier this year in 2025 have both demonstrated that post-pandemic incidents of violence and abuse towards teachers have been increasing exponentially. So there's definitely an issue there.
Failings in Scotland's care system are putting children's mental health at risk. That's the warning from one of the largest studies of its kind by the University of Glasgow. The study, which followed 500 children in foster care, warns the system is taking too long to find young children permanent homes. Tara Fitzpatrick has more.
Well, for my son, all he will say to me now is, they didn't listen to me. I wanted to stay with you, but they didn't listen.
15 years ago, Sharon Graham's struggle with drug and alcohol addiction led to her son being taken into care. 3 years later, he was adopted.
It became clear that I wasn't coping with everything that was going on and having this wee child who had just been handed to me.
Her son is now over 18 and she has regular contact with him. But now reflecting on the care system, she feels her family's outcome would be different if she had received better intervention.
When they had taken him, they didn't do any work with me. And I felt that that's where it was lacking. The time it took was horrendous. You know, when you've got a little child and you're consistently trying to make yourself better in whatever way you can to be a parent to this little one, you know, and they go away and they come back and they say, I want to stay with you. You know, why are they taking me again? So I think I've done, you know, a lot of work on myself, but if I'd have had this type of work done back in the day when my son was young, it could have been a whole lot different.
Sharon's story has helped inform a study of the care system led by the University of Glasgow and the NSPCC. The results show the rate of children getting a permanent home in England, where a judge oversees the process, is nearly 4.5 times faster compared to Scotland.
The really major problem is that these babies and young children are drifting in foster care. And so these decisions tend to be deferred and deferred and deferred. And what we found was that after 2.5 years in the study, just over a quarter of the children were in a permanent placement. And what that means is that nearly 3/4 of the children literally don't know where they're going to be at Christmas.
Researchers followed a study of over 500 children aged 0 to 5 in foster care. It concluded that fundamental changes were needed to the Scottish Care Service, including the allocation of a single sheriff for each child's case, greater adherence to court timescales, and more focus on mental health services for families.
You only need to speak to anybody, any family who's been involved in an adoption process to know that it can be a very arduous and fraught process sometimes. One of the key findings from this research is that the process of adoption should be judge-led. Most importantly, continuity of decision-making with somebody who gets to know the family.
Scotland's Children's Minister said the Scottish Government are committed to delivering the promise, a series of pledges to young people in care. She added that a new model of foster care is in development, with what she described as a flexible, child-centred approach.
Finally, people are listening, you know, and I think it can only be a good thing if we can use these findings and do something better with it.
Tara Fitzpatrick, STV News.
Glasgow City Council's proposed 5% visitor levy could harm tourism, according to the Federation of Small Businesses. The organisation is calling for an economic impact study, lower levy rates and a cap on chargeable nights to protect Glasgow's small business accommodation providers. The FSB says what works for Paris might not work for Glasgow. Now, Rahman has the sport at a big night tonight, even before the Old Firm weekend.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Spring Sale.
It's good to ignore him once in a while. Good evening. Brendan Rodgers says Rangers would be showing respect if their players gave a guard of honour at Sunday's Old Firm derby. Barry Ferguson says they've not even considered it and can't see why there's a clamour for it. The two teams face each other for the final time this season, with Celtic heading to Ibrox after being crowned champions for the 4th season in a row. Controversy is never far away when these two collide, and ahead of Sunday's encounter, the thorny issue of a guard of honour has reared its head once again. Cue the managers.
I always think if you're a champion to show, or not a champion, showing that humility to the other team, whatever the rivalry is, whatever, it's a mark of respect. But like I said, Celtic Rangers, it's an emotional rivalry. And if you're up short, and if you come up short quite a lot, then it can be a challenge for you and to justify that with your supporters.
I don't know why there's always a big clamour about a guard of honour. It's never happened, whether it's Celtic, whether it's Rangers, and I think it'll always just remain that way. Put myself in a position, it wouldn't bother me. I don't think it'll bother Celtic either, if I'm being brutally honest. So it's something that's not been in the conversations throughout the week.
While Barry Ferguson tasted victory in his first Old Firm derby as a manager, he's since slated his players for some very poor performances, including the draw against St Mirren last weekend.
It better change, and it has to change, so that's something again we spoke about as a group. That's something that I wasn't happy with. That was clear. You've seen that after the game. So, again, we went through a lot this week, and I expect him to take the information on.
Celtic and Jota have been dealt a major blow. The winger will be sidelined for up to 9 months after suffering a cruciate ligament injury. While the champions defeated their rivals in September and in the League Cup final, Rangers have responded with back-to-back victories in the league.
When it was win or bust in the cup final, we won it, because that's it. These games we've been so comfortable, and even though you're pushing, I know what these games mean to supporters and what it means to myself and the club. There just can be that little bit in the back of the mind that you're 13 points clear or 16 points clear.
Celtic defender Alistair Johnson misses the game through injury, while Leon Balogun returns for Rangers. Now it's a huge night in the Championship. Either Falkirk or Livingston will be promoted to the Premiership this evening. The two teams are level on points, but the Bairns are in the driving seat going into the final round of fixtures of the season. Live now to Ronnie Charters, who's at the Falkirk Stadium. Ronnie.
Yeah, Rahman, thousands of Falkirk fans will be travelling here to the stadium, hoping to see a bit of history and see their side return to the top flight for the first time in 15 years. But just down the M9, there'll be Livy fans who'll be hoping their side can spring back to the Premiership at the very first time of asking. Livingston hosting Partick Thistle here at the Falkirk Stadium, Falkirk hosting newly relegated Hamilton Accies. And this title race was supposed to be all wrapped up weeks ago. Falkirk were way ahead, but a recent poor run of results have let Livy back into this title race. And let's just take a look at how close it really is at the top of that championship table. Level on points, and it's now just 8 goals of a difference for Falkirk, which sees them in the driving seat. John McGlynn knowing his side, if they win tonight, it's all but back to the Premiership. Let's now hear from both managers.
Huge for the football club, could be historic to get the club back to the Premiership. It's got loads of positives from it. We can probably put a youth system back in place. Obviously the guys that have not managed to play in the Premiership will get an opportunity to play in the Premiership. There's loads of motivation to make this happen.
I think there's more of a chance than what I felt we would have at this stage of the season, to be honest. I think I was very vocal on that. Maybe a couple of months ago I thought it was Falkirk were a wee bit out in front, but they failed to get it over the line. So I think there's a very good opportunity for us as a football club to be playing Premier League football next year.
John McGlynn promising his players they could be partying in Ibiza this weekend if they get the job done, or will the Championship trophy reside in West Lothian with Livingston? A huge night in store at the top of the Championship, but also in the playoffs. Partick Thistle's currently sitting in 4th, 2 points ahead of Raith Rovers. Partick Thistle against Livingston, whilst Raith Rovers, they travel away to Queen's Park. It is a drama-filled final day in the Championship, at the top and in the playoffs. What more could you want, Rahman, on a sunny Friday night?
No wonder you're excited. Ronnie Charters at the Falkirk Stadium. Thanks very much for that. Birmingham boss David Gray says securing a European place could help attract players to the club in the summer. Hibs' 17-game unbeaten run in the Premiership came to an end following their defeat to Aberdeen last weekend. Gray's team, who host Dundee United tomorrow, are third in the table above the Dons on goal difference.
If we can go and finish the season and then end up in Europe and everything that comes with that, you know, it's a real attractive place to come and play your football if anyone wants to come and join the club. But also, as I've said, it's about keeping this group together as much as you can as well. Everyone's got their own situations and ambitions, what they'll always have. So it's never just as simple as we want to keep him. There's always other parties involved and what that looks like.
David Gray looking for a response from his players this weekend. Now, fresh from signing a new contract at St Mirren, Michael Mandron says he'd love the chance to play for Scotland. The striker, who's committed himself to the Saints until the summer of 2026, was born in France but qualifies to play for Scotland through his mother.
I would love to. There's been talks about it. Every time I score a few goals, there's talks about it. So it would be amazing. It would be great. It would be such an honour. And I think it's just on me to keep working and keep being consistent, so that maybe I could potentially get a call up.
From football to rugby, and a massive occasion not just for the club but the city. The words of Edinburgh head coach Sean Everett ahead of the European Challenge Cup semi-final at home to Bath tomorrow. Pierre Schumann and Jamie Ritchie are amongst a quintet of players returning to the starting 15. The capital side progressed to the last four after defeating South African side Bulls in the quarterfinals.
It's going to be a massive occasion for Edinburgh, and I'm talking about Edinburgh as a city as well. And we're definitely going to need a top performance to be able to get the result. Yeah. For us, you know, I think the last 3 or 4 games have been knockout rugby anyway. so we certainly know how to put pressure on ourselves, and we know how to handle that.
This is only my 4th semi-final I would have been involved in since joining 14 years ago. So, you know, when you're younger and you're in a semi-final, you think they're going to come around a lot, but they don't. So we've just got to enjoy the week, enjoy the build-up to it, and make sure we deliver when it comes to game day on Saturday.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Spring Sale.
Yes, a massive match for Edinburgh tomorrow. Their game gets underway at 3 o'clock. I just got some curling news to give you before I go. At the Mixed Doubles World Championships, Scotland's Jen Dodds and Bruce Mout are through to the semi-finals. Well done to them. That's all the sport for me tonight. Hope you're not too gutted that I snubbed you.
You said you would go on. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I will.
Cheers, Robert. Thank you. Sean is here with the weather forecast.
Outbreaks of ancient sites will gradually settle into an evening of pizza plates al fresco. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
A very good evening to you. We've had an awful lot of dry weather through much of April. Extremely dry in the northeast of the country. Parts of Aberdeenshire had less than 10 millimetres for the whole month. Now, with high pressure nearby, it does mean the weather is going to stay mostly dry for the foreseeable. Probably the next couple of weeks, largely dry, so not much in the way of rainfall, although we will see a little bit coming through during tonight. Now, As we head through the night, a lot of dry weather, clear spells, especially across southern parts, but we do see a weak weather front coming into north, bringing in some patchy rain across the Highlands, parts of Argyll and Bute, Stirlingshire by the end of the night, and then later on that runs its way across Glasgow and Ayrshire. Early on tomorrow morning, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, so there will be some rain here. But then that clears away, and for most of us tomorrow it is a dry day. Plenty of sunny spells, may just catch a few showers across the Highlands, but for most of us dry with sunshine. Look at the wind arrows, they're coming in from the north tomorrow, so of course it is a cool direction, but despite that, we might still manage to Bartonshire, Renfrewshire, Glasgow, up to 16, which is 61 in Fahrenheit. OK, it's not the 20s we had earlier on in the week, but in the sunshine, if you can get shelter from the breeze, it still shouldn't feel too bad. Temperatures down a wee notch on Sunday, but again, mostly dry with brighter sunny spells. Temperatures about 12 degrees, up to 14 or 15 on Monday. So good news for you, Saturday, Sunday and Monday, looking largely dry. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally, he's the only artist to score a hit in the UK album charts every year since 1988, making Daniel O'Donnell one of the most successful recording stars ever. The Irish singer is performing in Glasgow and Aberdeen for his devoted fans next week, and Emma Cameron spoke to him about his career for tonight's What's on Scotland.
My feet may wander 1,000 places.
I feel like we've practically adopted you here in Scotland because you're here that often and you've so many fans over here. What makes you keep on coming back to see it?
Well, down through the years I've been here, you know, doing loads and loads of shows. But even before that, my father and mother in the very early part of their marriage lived in Falkirk. I have more family here in Scotland than anywhere. We love coming back to do concerts. We come to Edinburgh sometimes. It's Glasgow and Aberdeen, so we're looking forward to the two shows.
I said hello, Mary Lou. A goodbye, heart. Sweet.
But you have been in the album charts here every decade.
I'm very blessed, you know, with a great following, and everything I did, you know, they were supportive of it, be it the shows, be it buying records or even calendars. Without the audience, I would never have had all the success or the longevity.
And your latest one is a compilation album. It must be hard to choose for a collection like that when you've got so much under your belt.
The first album was released in 1984. It was called The Boy from Donegal. I'm stretching the boy a bit now.
Original.
I've recorded every year since.
Down at the La-di-da, there's a perfect margarita in a mason jar at the end.
Your video down the La-di-da, Club Tropicana
What do you
vibes.
think of that?
That was brilliant.
Even our grandchildren, Archie, the wee boy, he'd say to me, Gaga, will you play the La-di-da? He says, so I can see you in the skirt. He gets a great kick out of it. Oh, no, you know.
Go on.
Oh, go on.
Down at the La-di-da, there's a perfect margarita.
Can't unsee that. What's on Scotland at 7. From all of us, thanks for watching. Good night.